Well, today President Obama and the Joint Chiefs Chairman, General Martin Dempsey, will meet with the defense chiefs from more than 20 coalition countries for a progress report on the war against ISIS. It comes as the Syrian town of Kobani and even key parts of Iraq come under increasing threat from ISIS forces. Our next guest says if ISIS continues making gains in Iraq, it could push Baghdad into forging even closer ties with Iran, writing in part, quote, "But today, using President Obama's strategic hesitation and the Iraqi government's ineptitude, the Islamic State has its black flag flying from Kobani, Syria, down the Euphrates to just outside Baghdad. Denied assistance, Iraq's key strategic province of Anbar may soon fall. And if that happens, Iraq's prime minister will probably make a deal with the Middle East's other sectarian mafia, Iran." Tom Rogan is a columnist at the National Review, the man who wrote those words, also at the Daily Telegraph. Tom, thanks very much for being with us. So what would that kind of Iraqi Iranian alliance mean when it comes to fighting ISIS and overall stability of the Middle East?
Great to be with you. What it would mean is essentially very bad news for the United States, because as much as we've heard some in the media saying that Iran can be relied upon as a partner against the Islamic State, the key here is to remember that the ideology of Iran, the political ideology, is rooted in the guardianship of the jurist, Khomeiniism, the original supreme leader of Iran. And that is, in basic terms, Shia authoritarianism. It is emphasized in the kind of terrorism that we see regularly, aside from what's going on in Iraq, in Beirut. It's emphasized in the kind of groups that Iran has supported and continues to support in Iraq. One good example, there's a group AAH, which is Asib al-Haq, which essentially like to use power drills on Sunni civilians during the years of the US presence in Iraq, but is now regrouping and acting in concert with Iranian special forces. So an alliance between Iraq and Iran would mean a reinforcement of Shia political sectarianism, the disenfranchisement of Sunni civilians, and the escalation of this conflict throughout the region. And so it would be just about the worst possible scenario that you could have.
You said in that same article, you described President Obama as having a patently defective strategy and suggested that the U.S. military is frustrated with that strategy. Elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've seen it's very difficult for the U.S. military because of their necessary professionalism to come out and openly criticize the president. Of course, they couldn't do that. But in terms of the comments that you've seen, especially from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey, in terms of talking about the need ultimately to have ground forces in some way, in terms of talking about the limitations of a present strategy, you see that clear disagreement. And it's a simple fact. If you look at what's happening on the ground, the Islamic State's momentum in Anbar, in northern Iraq, in northern Syria, around Kobani, again, that Euphrates corridor that I referenced in my piece, their approach towards Baghdad International Airport, that this situation is intolerable, and that the U.S. military know, unless you have those special forces on the ground, embedded with Iraqi special forces units, providing air attack controlling options, then you don't have the presence on the ground, the physical ability to get on-site intelligence and to grade the Islamic State. And one further thing, the problem here is that the Islamic State is continuing their atrocities. As much as we're seeing some reports that Kobani hasn't yet fallen, just a while ago today, I saw a photograph from Kobani of about a 26-year-old man, slick backed, gelled hair, could have been a Westerner. I mean, he wasn't. He was a Syrian, but he had his head cut off, and there was an Islamic State fighter waving his head around. These people will not be brought into a political alignment, and so you have to destroy them, and you have to persuade moderate Sunnis to come onto your side. And again, this idea that the Islamic State somehow owns Sunnis is patently absurd, because just this weekend in Fallujah, the Islamic State hung 2 Iraqi policemen over overpasses. That was a signal to the Sunni population of Fallujah, don't stand against us. And at the moment, America isn't standing with those civilians and mobilizing the Anbar tribes, as the U.S. Marine Corps did in 2006, 7, 8. And so we have a big problem there.
What a mess. Tom Rogan. Tom, it's good to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you, John.